Hey everybody, this is Pick One, Pack One, everything you need to start your draft off right. I'm your host, Gavin McKay, and I'm here with my co-host, Paul Kamau.
It's Camo. And
Kamau, I even
Camo.
wrote it.
Yeah. And today we're diving into a Foundations primer. This is not going to be the most in-depth primer in the world. This is more a compass trying to help you orient your draft early and kind of figure out the lane that you need to be in and why.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to dive into all the different color pairs. We're going to talk about some of our favorite cards. But before we kick that off, we'd like to start with a segment we call Cool Deck of the Week. Cool Deck of the Week. Yeah, it's where we focus on a deck that we found on 17 lands that trophied. So this is a deck that went 7 wins before they got 3 losses. And we're going to see how this deck functions, something interesting or cool about the deck, and why we think it was successful. We're also going to talk about some of the strongest cards from the deck and some of the matchups that it could possibly face. This week, we found a Boros deck from Foundations that features a few surprising cards. So I'm going to pull that up right now.
There's one that's very apparent. It's very apparent.
You'd say it's slightly hair apparent?
Yes, indeed.
So this is the hair apparent deck that we saw. We see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that 5 or 6?
I am counting 5.
5 hair apparents. So obviously that was a pretty strong card. Hair apparent, really one of the most surprising cards from this set. Only because it's rare that you see a card that has the clause. A deck may have any number of cards named hair apparent. That is actually successful. The last time we saw this, I think, was with the Ooze card, Slime Against Humanity. And that didn't see quite as much play. Certainly not one that you'd want to put 5 of in your deck in a limited environment, right, Paul?
No, definitely not as exciting as like the Bureaucrats mill deck from a few years ago. The name of them is escaping me right now.
Mm-hmm. The thing I like in this deck is 2 reasons. One, they have 2 heraldic banners, which will really, really help with all the tokens that they're able to make. Even 2 or 3 of these hair apparents can really put a dent in the amount of creatures that your opponent has to deal with. Pair that with the Dazzling Angel that we see, and it looks like you've got a pretty nasty, out of nowhere kind of instant board state.
They're not losing the race. They're not losing the race.
The Battlesong Berserker to give something menace can be a problem. The Sower of Chaos giving unblockable. These 2 fell on our saviors, though. I can't say enough good things about this card. I mean, to me, it's one of the best white cards that you could possibly pick up. And then, obviously, Leyline Axe. What are your thoughts on Leyline Axe?
It's Leyline Axe. It's Embercleave Part 2.
Embercleave Part 2, I like it. Yeah, and the fact that it can start in your opening hand and just immediately impact the board as early as turn 3. If you're playing in a green shell 2, you can even possibly get it down with a Llanowar Elves on turn 2. So it's one of those cards that can basically make any threat relevant, especially dinky ones like the 1/1s created with the hair apparents or a Courageous Goblin, right? To round it out, you've got a couple combat tricks, the Sure Strike, you've got the Burst Lightning. The important thing about this one that it can go face, a Fanatical Firebrand for any pesky 1/1s like other Healer's Hawks. What matchups do you think would be the best for this deck to face, and which ones do you think would be maybe harder to deal with?
I would try and just get under everybody who's trying to dirtle or go big. You just want to shut the door as fast as possible. And This looks like a deck that is going to go wide enough. The thing that I am missing is the Goblin Pump Your Teen card. This name is escaping me at the moment.
It's a rare, so it's kind of hard to open one of those every once in a while. But for me, actually, the biggest problem that I have with this deck is that I think the curve is too high. Is that weird to say? I think the curve is maybe a little bit too high for a deck like this. I understand that there's a ton of 2s in here, but at the 3 mana slot, I would love to see more Dazzling Angels or some other type of evasive creature other than maybe Inspiring Paladin. It looks like if you're on 3, you're having a hard time going from 3 to 5. I guess the Heraldic Banner makes it a little bit more palatable because they also produce mana. But the fact that it only produces mana of the chosen color doesn't really help with your double casting cost of this
Right.
dragon trainer. I would have loved to see a dragon trainer and maybe a Sarah Angel or a dragon trainer and some other top end card, and then maybe lose one of the 4s like the Sower of Chaos or even the Battlesong Berserker. I don't like as much in this style of deck because you're not really hitting with big things, you're hitting with small things. So it does make it more relevant. I actually think that the Sower of Chaos would be my one cut from this deck,
Okay.
and maybe one of the dragon trainers.
Well, is this a dragon trainers deck? Like, I almost feel that you don't want either of the dragon trainers. Like, I would love another 2-drop. I would love another combat trick. I would love something that's going to. I would love another
Healer's Hawk with a
Hawk.
Leyline Axe is disgusting.
The correct number of Healer's Hawks to have in your deck is a mathematical formula. It is always n+1, where n is the current number of Healer's Hawks you already have in your deck.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. I can't say enough good things about the Healer's Hawk. One of my favorite commons from this set. It's always been good, in every set that it's been printed in, and I'm just very impressed with it. So that was the cool deck of the week. Like I said, this got 7 wins on Arena. I don't know who piloted this deck. They were a Mythic player, so props to them, whoever they were. We'll take a quick look at the sideboard here as well. Looks like they had a Rite of the Dragon Caller, and they could have actually been going for a red-blue spells type deck instead, but they just got pulled into that red-white with all those hair apparents. I actually would have probably cut the one of the Dragon Callers as well, just for the Axguard Cavalry, and I probably would have played the Seraph over it as well. But that's just me. It's certainly still got 7 wins, so they were obviously doing something right, drawing a lot, and they did run 16 lands, so that's the exact number of lands that I would definitely run in this deck, especially with 1 tap land. You definitely want to do that. So that was our cool deck of the week. Props to whoever was piloting that, and congratulations on your 7 wins.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about color pairings and foundations. Paul, you want to take it from here? Talk to people a little bit about what we're going to get into.
So we're going to be looking at the kind of guiding you into the color pairs that have been performing well to help you steer your own drafts as you're getting into this format if you're new to the format. If you're not new to the format and you're struggling, this is also going to kind of be a compass to help you orient where you should be or where you'd like to be, ideally, given what you end up opening in a given draft. Having a little light to point the way is important when you're trying to navigate your way through any format. The big thing that we're going to look at right off the bat that is surprising to me until we looked at these numbers and broke them down is that Gruul is the top color pair based on win rate. It has a almost 57% win rate.
That's surprising.
Based on 17 lands
I haven't
data.
seen that too much in practice. And again, all these stats come from 17 lands, where we got the deck of the week. These users of 17 lands, if you're using 17 lands, typically they have a little bit of a higher win percentage than people that don't use 17 lands. It's a specialized tool for folks who like to analyze their own data. It kind of gives you all of your different metrics, your win percentage, your color percentage, places you like to go, patterns you like to see, best commons and uncommons. So taking this with a grain of salt in that some of these players are really, really good if they're using these tools. To see Gruul that high, about 0.3% higher than the second highest color combination, which in this case is Azorius. Tell me what you like about Gruul or what you don't like about Gruul in this format, and tell me how you think that these decks are performing, because that really surprised me.
That massively surprises me. I would really want to dig into that by looking at some Gruul decks that have performed well and kind of dig into the commonalities between those decks, because in my experience, green has been an avoid at all costs color. So it's
I haven't
surprising
had that same
to
experience
see...
myself. Just to disagree with you a little bit there.
Okay.
I find that green can be a very, very suitable color. I think it just depends on how many Llanowar elves you get, to be honest with you. So how many times you can actually ramp out, a spell ahead of the curve. But go on what you were saying about Gruul being, I guess, weaker. I think red may be the weakest color for me
Okay.
personally.
I would say that I've had a lot of success with red. I've enjoyed playing it. Burst Lightning is a hell of a drug.
Mm.
I'm
I
just
would take N+1 of those cards as well.
exactly. So that's where I see the red half of the deck is that you've got your Burst Lightnings, you've got your Sure Strikes, things like that. It's figuring out what is the green portion of your deck
Yeah.
and what your game plan is. Like you're definitely, as you said, you're leaning on Llanowar Elves most likely if you're going to be successful, and you're trying to come down ahead on the curve and smash any of the slower decks before they
Yeah.
can deploy their own haymakers.
So I just found an example of a Gruul deck that trophied.
Okay,
There are quite a few of them on here.
okay,
The highlight cards to me,
I'd love to see this.
this is a really great way to actually explore what works and what doesn't. So to me, the cards that stand out are the treetop snare spinner, the fiery annihilation, the felling blow, and then all these eager truffle snouts. This 4/2 trampler. I and then there's two Ruby Daring Trackers and Slumbering Cerberus, and these courageous goblins are at best in Gruul. It just does seem like you need all of these pieces for it to be good. Like, for example, I don't think that the Dwynen's Elite is at its best here, because the amount of times that you go turn one Llanowar Elves, turn two Dwynen's Elite, I don't think it's going to be very. It's not going to happen as often as you'd want it to. I also don't like the Dwynen in here
In
either.
this deck, not necessarily, but that is kind of speaking to me as like the through lane you should be looking for if you're going to go into green is you need to be looking for those elves. If you're gonna maximize. Though I do
One,
like Ruby and seeing double Ruby there definitely
yeah,
is
I mean,
something
this is
nice to
always going to
see.
be a 3/3 with haste, and pretty much every time in this deck because of all the 4 power creatures. I mean, even the Beast King Ranger that's a 3/3 becomes a 4/3 with any creature. And gets trampled. The other thing is all of these have trample. The truffle sets all have trample. One card that kind of sticks out to me as well. There's two cards that really stick out to me as maybe out of place, and one of them is Loot, the Exuberant Explorer. Um, you know, I am not super high on Loot. I think it's good in decks that have extremely um, good finishers. Like if you had like a Galta or something that you could look
Yeah.
for. The fact that it's 6 mana means it's pretty much going to hit every card in your deck, except for maybe like the Sire of Seven Deaths. But I just don't understand what it's doing in this deck particularly. It's got such a low toughness that it's hard to imagine that it would be doing that much work in it. And I guess it can help you with a little bit of flood if you have too many lands in your hand, but
It's
that's one that I am kind of scratching my head on.
it's certainly flood insurance. I don't know that this deck is going to necessarily suffer from flood with 16 lands and a bunch of stuff it wants to do early
11
game.
2-drops.
Yeah.
11 2-drops.
So
That's really good. You want to look at the sideboard at all?
yeah, let's look at that.
All right. So it looks like they were always a green red. They got into it very quickly. There's not really any other colors in here. I
Couple
see
of random
a
white
Goblin
cards, and that's
Borders,
it.
which would probably be pretty good. They actually cut an Eager Truffle Snout, which I find strange because if it's a plan, that's your plan. That's what you're gonna push through with. That actually is really good. I also like a lot of kill spells in a trample deck like this because if you kill a creature that's blocking you, instead of trading, you actually do all the trample damage. So
Absolutely.
it can be kind of a gotcha moment. The giant growth in here probably did a lot of work as well.
Absolutely. What do you think about the Needle Tooth pack? Out of curiosity, what's
I'm
been
not
your
a fan of
experience
Needle
with
Tooth.
that?
I don't like Noodle Tooth. I think the morbid triggers are too. It's hard to trigger them enough, and they even have a card in there that is completely nombo with it with the fiery annihilation because it's an exile effect. So I don't think that there's enough there that would really push me into that. That being said, I don't actually see anything in there that would replace it. It's a fine top end card, but it's nothing really to write home about. I have one more deck here that we can just take a look at real quick before we move on to the next color pairing. But this one is a little bit different, and I'll ask you, what do you think the similarity is, and what do you think the biggest difference is going to be? And I'll give you a hint. It's about a card that we discussed earlier. Spot the difference. That's a good one right there.
There's a good card right there. Leyline Axe makes any deck better.
All right, so talk to me about what you like about this deck. I love how low power it is, or excuse me, low mana cost it is. I like that there are so many plays that you can make on turn one. No matter what you need, if you need a land on turn one, you can bushwhack for it. If you need to kill a really pesky creature on turn one, you've got it. You've got 2 ramp creatures. You've got a Kellen that's really good in the mid to late game, and a Fanatical Firebrand that can just kill any annoying 1-drop pretty much on the spot. And a lot of other 1 toughness creatures like the Thespian, right? The Wary Thespian. That's one that you can just pop off, just because it's got 1 toughness. This one is a little bit of a different setup because it's got 6 2-drops instead of 11 and 6 3-drops. But I really like the combination of spells, and the Krenko mob boss can just win on its own.
Absolutely.
I mean, it really can.
The big thing to note is that this is a Llanowar Elves deck again. We see another Ruby. So it's a very strong indication that you really want to be ramping if you're in Gruul. You want to get to those bigger mana cards as quickly as possible. Right. But this is also, I would love to just go Kellen Trailblazer into Ruby Daring Tracker into maybe I'm just trying to pump into Kellen as quickly as I can and hope that the opponent doesn't have an answer. If they're playing
No, go ahead. Sorry.
If they're playing Tapland or something, or Tapland.
It just gives you so much tempo.
Yeah, exactly. You just come in and smash them. I also really like the card I was trying to remember the name of, Goblin Surprise, hiding in there.
Goblin Surprise,
yeah.
Yes.
So
I like the modality on it.
Absolutely. Modality is great.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if this has a pretty good game in hand win rate, which is another stat that we can definitely look at on 17 lands. Let's take a quick look at the sideboard. One last note. I do not like the Quill of the Great Worm. I don't know what your feelings on it are. I just feel like it's too slow. By the time you're at 6 mana, it's like a win more card. Okay, yes, all of your creatures, whenever they do damage, as long as they don't die, will get 1/1 counters. But I've never been in a situation where I've been excited to play this card or have this card. Like, I'm excited if this card is played against me because, it's usually like too late to catch you back up. And it's usually just kind of like a win more card. Oh yeah, you could get, double your counters on some of your creatures, but your opponent's not going to make unfavorable trades, unless they absolutely have to. And then by that point, you're probably already ahead. So
if there's a deck, real quick, if there's a deck where it's going to be good, it's probably going to be in this deck though, because you've got Llanowar Elves into Ruby Daring Tracker into, I'm doing the Great Worm
Banner
as early, into Banner, into Great Worm as early as possible. I'm going to slam this. Do you have something that can kill a 7/7 on turn 4?
Black has a lot of answers for it. They've got the best removal. So I would hate a black matchup with this deck. But honestly, I can come around to it. I can come around to the Quill Great Room in this deck, maybe particularly. Real quick, they cut Coma. I mean, that's definitely the right move, but
sad.
You hate to see it.
Sad, yeah.
You hate to see
you'd hate to see them not into blue. Kind of makes you wonder if that was a late thing. Yeah.
Trample Ward 4. If it sticks around at all, like if they don't kill it immediately, and really the best way to kill a Coma is the Eaten Alive, I think, in black, because it can just cost 1 mana, and then you can pay the Ward 4. But the Coma, World Eater, and I think the Sire of 7 Deaths are probably my the two cards that are the least killable. There's just not that many answers for them. So that's what Gruul looks like in Foundations. The successful decks, anyway, the ones that are really doing great work with how you're actually going to be winning games. Let's talk about some other color pairings. What else are you seeing, Paul?
I mean, I'm really jazzed on Azorius. I thought Azorius was going to be the top color pair. Blue-white flyers is one of my favorite archetypes. Pretty much anytime you can draft a blue-white flyers deck.
Yeah. I think this would be a good time for us to talk about the Signpost Uncommons, and I'm just going to pull those up right now. The Signpost Uncommon is a new card, right? It's not a reprint.
I believe the Eagle is a reprint from a core set.
It is a reprint?
I believe it's a reprint from a core set.
All right, can you see that? So we've got the Empyrean Eagle. So it is a white and a blue mana. It's got flying, and other creatures you control with flying get +1/+1.
It was
all
originally...
the birds of the skies are the spirit's brood, gathered for safety under its wings.
And it was originally in Core Set 2020.
Core Set 2020. There we go. So yeah, so this is a great creature. Obviously, you need to do a little bit to get it to work. You know, like it's not just going to win you the game on its own, unlike a Balmor or Perforating Artist, which we can talk about later, or Dreadwing Scavenger, which is probably the best Signpost Uncommon. But Eagle is really good. I mean, I really like it. I think it does everything you want. It's kind of like Dazzling Angel, except it makes Dazzling Angel better. You know, like if you're somebody who's going for that Azorius style of deck, you really, really want to have this card in there. And I'm sure if we go and look at some of these champion decks, these seven winners, I'm sure we'll find a theme of Empyrean Eagle being front and center.
Well, if I'm looking at and rating these cards as a signpost versus as an individual card, I have some different opinions. So as individual cards, definitely you're putting the Dimir, the Scavenger. I would probably rate that as the best card of all of these cards overall.
Yep. Do you want to read what it says?
Okay, Dreadwing Scavenger is a colorless, a blue and a black. It's a creature nightmare bird. It has flying. It's a 2/2. And it says, whenever this creature enters or attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. And it also has...
attacks is so important.
So important. Draw a card, discard a card is one of my favorite lines of text to hear, especially in a format that has a light Graveyard Matters theme, like Foundations. And this card has a Graveyard Matters mechanic built right into it. It has Threshold, which means that this creature gets +1/+1 and has Death Touch as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. That is your threshold. 7 or more cards in graveyard. This card is fantastic.
Battlefields for corpses, consuming flesh and souls alike.
Delicious, delicious. I love this card. I got smashed by a deck last night that had 4 of these in it. I thought I drafted a sweet Dimir deck. I had 4 copies of Refute. I just felt like I had all the removal for days, and I just could not beat 4 Dreadwing Scavengers.
Yeah, it's really disgusting because it filters your draws and is a relevant attacker and defender. Because as soon as you hit that threshold mark, it gets Death Touch as well. So even if you're in a spot where you actually have to use it defensively, it's still very good. You know, and 2/2 is not a bad stat line. I mean, really, it's not a bad stat line at all. And some of the more relevant creatures that you're looking for in the Dimir decks are top-end cards, and this will just buy you so much time and also draw you into them. I like to say that like deck filtering and filtering in general, where you're actually taking your draws and you're taking the cards that are in your hand and sculpting the perfect hand, you know, it really makes it so that Magic seems easy. You know, it really makes it so much easier to make your decisions because if you have to discard then draw, it's different, right? It's different because, you know, you have to give up a resource and you might not get anything back. But if it's a draw discard, you already have a lot of lands and you draw another land, guess what? You can just pitch that land again. You know, you don't actually have to give anything up in order to get there. So
the decision tree is a lot easier.
It's a lot smaller.
You're not punished. But going back to the Eagle is more screaming, build around me.
The Screaming Eagle?
Yeah, Screaming Eagle.
Screaming Eagle.
That Empyrean Eagle is saying, build around me. You know, other creatures you control with flying get +1/+1. If you're looking for a sign to say build a deck around a theme, this is one of those cards you can easily point to and say, this is the theme. Give me all those healer stocks. Give me that 1/3 angel that grows with other angels. Like, just let's do it.
Here's a sniff test real quick.
Okay.
Which of these signpost uncommons would you take? Pick one, pack one.
If I was looking at all of these in a pack, I'm just slamming the scavenger and not looking back.
I am too. I think that's my number one signpost, uncommon here. Where is, like, so when you're talking about signals, where would be the spot where you'd want to take Empyrean Eagle? Obviously, Dreadwing Scavenger is a pick one, pack one card because you can do so much with it, and it's one of the best cards that you can put in your deck. But Empyrean Eagle, if you found that, you were taking a couple red cards to start, and then this was passed to you third pick, is that a sign that blue-white is probably open and you should maybe try and get into that lane?
It's probably a sign that it's open, but it could also just be that, like, pick 3.
If it's pick 3, like, that means that 2 people took other cards over it. I can only think of a couple cards. Obviously, they could have up to 2 rares or a mythic and a rare. If it's pick 4 or 5, you're definitely switching.
I don't know that I'm abandoning my red just yet, but I'm probably picking this up as a wait and see. Like, I'm generally in my first 5 picks or so. What is the best card? What do I think is open that people are passing to me? Try to just sift out and find the lane, which is very hard to do, as you said, with the number of rares that can be in packs. So it's just looking at what are the best cards that are showing up to me, and then sculpting a draft from there after I've kind of identified where I want to be.
Absolutely. So going back to our original theme, which is, what these colors look like. It's actually pretty interesting because aside from the signpost or the 2 color pairs, there's another really interesting stat that we found from lands, which is that monocolored decks are very good, and especially mono white decks with a splash of blue. And my guess is that mono white is really great because you get access to all the best flyers in the game, all of the angels, all of the healers hawks, which, we've already sung its praises. And you also get access to some of the best, I don't want to say the best removal, but it's removal that is exile removal or cheaper removal like Luminous Rebuke. So you do have all of your pieces there. And then if you just splash a little bit of blue in there, like an Empyrean Eagle, for instance, you really can go a very, very long way. And in fact, it has the highest win rate of it's the highest win rate. It's 59%. So that's 3 points higher or 2.5 points higher than any other of these colors. So I personally drafted a mono white deck not too long ago at a Friday Night Magic and went 3-0. I didn't want to say it was easy, but it was like one of the best, most fun decks I've ever built because I was able to get all the pieces together, and going monocolored is always fun. You can't always pull it off, but if you get the option to, there are some very, very good pieces of white that if other people around you aren't drafting it, you really can put the pedal down and really get a really great deck out of it.
I'm a big fan of white. Like, in my opinion, the numbers don't bear me out, but I feel like white is the strongest color just because it's so deep. Like, you can find good cards late into the draft because white is so good overall, and sometimes you also can just be in the right seat where 2 people took rares and other people took other stuff, and it's 4th and 5th pick, and I'm getting white cards that I would have first picked, and I'm like, yes, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the next color on the list is Boros, which has a point below Azorius and Gruul is Boros. It has a 55.9 win percentage, so about a half percentage lower than Azorius and Gruul. We just talked about a Boros deck to start. we can continue on there. This card, the Heroic Reinforcement, which is the signpost uncommon for it, let's just read that real quick and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Heroic Reinforcements is 2 colorless, a red and a white. Create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1, gain haste. Cries of Anguish, quickly spurred cries of action. And you can see the beautiful art there. So this is a signpost uncommon, but it's not a creature, It's essentially, it's not a combat trick because it's a sorcery, but it's essentially throwing your cards down on the table and saying, can you deal with this? Can you deal with creating 4 power with haste and giving the rest of your board, +1/+1? This is best in the go wide strategy with the Heir Apparents that we saw earlier.
Yep.
But it's also very good with flyers. It's also very good with pretty much everything that white really wants to do. I don't know if it's as good. I almost think that it's really good in a mono white deck with a red splash.
Absolutely.
I would splash for this card if I was playing mono white for sure.
It's a nice way to kind of curve out and then slam this down and say,
yeah,
are we done? Or if we're playing in paper, are we going to game 2?
Yeah. I mean, it really is. If you can curve out with this, if you do Healer's Hawk turn 1, then maybe like a Cathar Commando or a Helpful Hunter, and then either turn 3 like in a Rabo or the Prideful Parent, which are the cards that
Prideful Parent
other,
would be huge.
Other cards, they make other tokens. And then you throw this down on 4. Like I can't imagine that there are too many decks that can deal with the aggressive start like that without having too much removal in their opening hand. Like,
right.
If you're a black deck and you've got like a Stab and an Eaten Alive in your opening hand and maybe like a Burglar Rat, this is probably the worst case scenario for you to see on turn 4.
Yeah.
Okay, so Boros is doing Boros things. It's very aggressive. The one rare that I have really, really been impressed with in red for Boros is the Sear Slicer Goblin, the raid mechanic.
Okay.
Let me pull that
up and let's talk about that.
All right, so Sear Slicer Goblin, very good card. It is a 2 mana, 1 in a red for a creature goblin warrior with raid. So at the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. Aiko hadn't intended to start a riot, but now that it was underway, he was having a lot of fun. And that guy looks like he's having a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
And you have a lot of fun when you play this card.
It's important to note that it's a 2/1. Like, coming down on turn 2, if your opponent, again, has a slow start, they're not doing anything, you can start attacking with this guy or clear the way with a Burst Lightning and slam with this guy, and you're just going to start building that board. You're setting yourself up.
The best play, I think, is turn 1, either Llanowar Elves or Healer's Hawk. I prefer Healer's Hawk because it has evasion, into Sear Slicer Goblin. That's got to be like one of the best 1/2, like unstoppable start in Foundations, because it doesn't matter if it attacks, it only matters if you attacked.
Right.
In fact, you would almost make chump attacks sometimes with this, just so that you get the extra tokens out, especially if you're just playing to play that Heroic Reinforcement. This guy plays so well with so many cards in red. It plays well with Krenko. It plays well with the Heroic Reinforcements. It plays well with Claws Out, which is the white combat trick, or not combat trick, but the pump effect. It plays really well with, just so many of these. Goblin Surprise.
Goblin Surprise. They'll surprise you. I mean, yeah.
It just, you can hit for so hard out of nowhere. And it provides you that incremental advantage that you need sometimes, without having to do too much other than what you're doing, which is attacking. If you're in red and you're in white, you're probably attacking. You're probably the aggressor. If you're on the back foot, the card isn't as good, because again, you have to attack to get it to work. But it just synergizes so well on turn 2. And even when you draw it late in the game, it can stabilize you too. Like I said, even if you have to chump attack and, to just kind of see what your opponent's doing or make them use a combat trick or something, you can still get value that way. Cool. All right. So we talked about Boros, we talked about Gruul, and now we're going to talk about Rakdos.
I have not
love
had good luck with this deck.
I have had so much fun with this deck. All right. So for me, and, feel free to tell me to shut up because
Shut up.
I could just go on and on and on about Rakdos in this set. It just feels so good when it comes together. You do need kind of a lot to get it going, but once it gets going, I don't think it can really be stopped. The key cards for me really are some kind of Perforating Artist is a great example of a good signpost uncommon that's more balanced than people kind of give it credit for. All right, so I have an example of a Rakdos deck here, but let me just go back to the uncommons. So the Perforating Artist is a 3 mana. I noticed that a lot of these are 3 mana, or the highest cost mana of them is Tatyova. I think that's
At
the
5.
highest cost.
Yep.
It's a 5. And Tatyova is arguably one of the strongest cards individually. But I just think that blue-green is kind of lacking in a couple things, and the numbers reflect that as well. But Perforating Artist is a 3 mana with a black and a red. It's a Death Touch creature, 3/2, and it has Raid. And at the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent of their choice or discards a card. So it gives them a choice, but not really. So this is good in the early game. This is good in the late game. This is good in the mid game. This will basically force your opponent to get rid of resources on their board, or it'll force them to take damage, which is also very good with other cards that synergize in Rakdos. There are cards that will, trigger if your opponent lost life. Excuse me, not if they lost life, but if a creature died. So if they're sacking a creature, that'll trigger that. Actually, no, that's at the end step. So actually, that doesn't count. But red and black has a lot of removal. And so it isn't very hard to get your opponents to have no board presence whatsoever and just kind of whittle them down to nothing. My favorite card from the Rakdos archetype is actually the card on the screen here, Vampire Gourmand. Whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, draw a card, and this creature can't be blocked this turn. So it does what you want to do in a sacrifice deck, which is to have a free sacrifice outlook. Again, you have to be attacking, but it can't be blocked, so it's basically free damage. It also draws you a card. This is my favorite sack effect in black, and the best thing to pair it with, in my opinion, which this deck doesn't have any, it doesn't look like, but Infernal Vessel is super good with it, as well as Involuntary Servitude, which I'm going to pull up right now. Excuse me, not Involuntary Solitude, Involuntary Employment. So this is basically a threaten effect, but it also does 2 things that are really great. 1, it gives you a treasure, and 2, you can use it to either be sacrificed to the Vampire Gourmand, or my favorite use of it is taking the involuntarily employed thing. If your opponent has 2 creatures, you can just use the trick Eaten Alive to, sacrifice the creature that you just commandeered and exile the other creature on their board. Basically a 3-for-1 kind of, in that, you clear their whole board out and basically left them with nothing. I think that this deck went 7-2. Some of the cards that I see here that are really nice are the Stab. That's a first pickable card for sure. The Gorehorn Raider is very good in this deck as well, because you're going to be attacking. The Heartfire Immolator and the Hungry Ghoul. Hungry Ghoul is my second best way to sacrifice stuff. Bad thing is it just gives itself +1/+1 counters and doesn't draw you a card or become unblockable, but over time this will accumulate a ton of value for you. You said that you don't really like this archetype, or you don't necessarily have had a lot of success with it.
I haven't had a lot of success with this archetype, but I love a lot of individual cards that are possible for the archetype. I just have not had the luck of, when I've been in this color pair that I've had, both the stabs and the gourmand and like a reassembling skeleton or something to just keep popping
Reassembling
off.
skeleton is awesome in this archetype. Yeah. I'm going to see if I can try and find another Rakdos deck here just to give another example of what I think, a deck can look like. Let's see here. So like, again, I would do as many involuntary employments as possible. And the last thing here is actually, I didn't see, but there's actually a second signpost uncommon, or not uncommon, but a signpost rare that we didn't even talk about, which is Alesha, who laughs at fate. That is a busted card. You should take that. That would be a pick one, pack one card for me every day of the week.
Pop that up and show people this card. This card is fantastic.
Alesha, who laughs at fate. A Rakdos, 3 mana, red and a black mana, legendary creature, human warrior, 2/2. It has first strike, already great. 2/2 with first strike. And then whenever it attacks, you put a 1/1 counter on it. So if this comes down on turn 3, on turn 4, you're attacking with a 3/3 first strike, which is just fantastic. And then it has raid. Again, doesn't have to be the one that's attacking, but it's doing the damage. At the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, return target creature card with mana value less than or equal to Alesha's power from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, picture this. Turn 1, Infestation Stage, which is 1 black mana, right? When it dies, you create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token with flying. Turn 2, Vampire Gourmand. Turn 3, attack with the Gourmand, sacking the Infestation Stage to make a 1/1 insect creature, and have Alesha on the battlefield for your 3 mana play. Get back the Infestation Stage with Alesha because you attacked. Like that's a disgusting combo. Like really, that's like 5 mana worth of creatures on 3. It really is. And you've got an evasive threat with the insect. You've got first strike on your Alesha, so it can be difficult to kill after you get 1 or even 2 attacks out of it. It's basically a kill on sight card.
Oh, absolutely.
But just mixed together in that Rakdos shell, it really, really comes together because you want to be sacrificing your stuff, and the stuff that you're sacrificing usually isn't very good. But they do have good enter the battlefield abilities. Like, for example, the Burglar Rat is extremely good in this deck as well because you play it and then you sack it to the Gourmand or the Hungry Ghoul, and then you can get it back with Alesha or have a Macabre Waltz or something else that you're basically pulling it back from the graveyard so that you can replay it and just eat all the cards in your opponent's hand. It's great. I love me Rakdos.
I love me a Burglar Rat. Burglar Rat, Virus Beetle, any of the black and a colorless 1/1 enters the battlefield, opponent discards a card. I want to see that.
Bugler Rat.
Da.
How do you spell burglar?
LAR.
Oh.
PRG.
Yes. There it is.
Burglar Rat.
Burglar Rat.
Burglar Rat.
Okay, so Burglar Rat, 1 in a black. When this creature enters, each opponent discards a card. Even rats hoard their treasures. Are your precious things so different? Izoni. Yeah, so really, really, really good card. Again, it's good in any black deck, really, but I think it's especially good in Rakdos Sack because you can sacrifice it because it's just a little 1/1. And then any way to get it back, you immediately get value from it again.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, so we're through, not most of we're about halfway done with the color combinations. Do you have any overarching things that you've seen so far or any particular combos you'd want to call out?
I think the big thing that we're going to see is that cards that are good, that monocolored cards that are good, I should say, that you see in these decks, you're going to see a lot of them in other decks of other color pairs doing work. Like Burglar Rat is also great in Dimir Control, just stripping a resource out of an opponent's hand, just kind of setting yourself up to kind of shape and control the game that you want to play, get you to that late game when you're going to play a haymaker of some kind. And, maybe you even, maybe you even get to 9 mana and the Dark Realms happen and you're bringing this back and taking whatever the last card that your opponent's been holding on to and setting yourself up to win that game,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've gone through about half the color combinations. I think we're gonna call it here, and we're gonna actually come back with a part 2 in the next episode. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for listening. You can follow us on our Instagram, which is Pick1Pack1Pod, and that's PICK and then the number 1, Pack1 with the number again, pod. That's on Instagram. Yeah, we hope you enjoyed listening to our Foundations Prepper. These are the best color combinations that are in Foundations. Obviously, if you're at your local draft event on a Friday night and you happen to see an Empyrean Eagle or an Alesha, like jump on that.
That's
Those are the good ones.
that's definitely the signpost that's gonna shape your draft. So
Mm-hmm.
look
Or a
for it.
Dreadwing. Or a Dreadwing Scavenger.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Cool.
Do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap?
I would just say thank you guys for listening. Let us know what you think of our opinions about this. Don't hesitate to tell me I'm totally wrong. I want to hear that I'm totally wrong, but I want to hear why I'm totally wrong.
Absolutely.
None of us gets better unless we're also explained reasons. So
yes,
this whole podcast is going to be about a learning experience for us and for the listener. It's learning from all of us together collectively what works and what doesn't and why, so that we can all be better players.
Yeah, and I get better when I play better opponents, and better opponents get better when we all, have the same information. And the more we can grow this game, the more competitive it's going to be. And I can't wait to see it. I'm very excited.
Awesome.
Thanks, Paul.
Talk to you guys again soon.
Thank you all for listening. If you like the episode, please like and share. It helps us a lot. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episode, you can follow us on Instagram at Pick1Pack1Pod, or shoot us an email, pick1pack1pod@gmail.com. That's PICK, the number 1, PACK, the number 1, pod@gmail.com. You can also find us on Blue Sky at Pick1Pack1Pod. We're going to move to the end step, pass the turn, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.